Sugar and refined carbohydrates are the foods that cause your body to produce small, dense LDL. The people who told the McGovern Committee it was sugar and white flour probably had it right all along. Now, fortunately, after 40 years of blaming saturated fat, we're starting to see more research. We're starting to see that people are letting go of that idea. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. This is from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Among postmenopausal women, a higher saturated fat intake was associated with less progression of heart disease, whereas carbohydrate intake was associated with a greater progression of heart disease. Also from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, as it turns out, upon further review, saturated fat is not independently associated with cardiovascular disease. Quote, dietary efforts to reduce increasing burden of cardiovascular risk should primarily emphasize the limitation of refined carbohydrates. Now, those are observational studies. We don't want to make too much of them, so I'll show you a couple of clinical studies. This was in the Annals of Internal Medicine. The clinical study, the kind that mattered, one group was on a low-fat, low-calorie diet. The other group was on a low-carbohydrate, high-fat diet. The result, people on the high-fat diet showed greater reductions in blood pressure, triglycerides, small dense LDL, while raising their HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, by 23%. In other words, the diet that was supposed to kill us turned out to be producing the greatest improvements in cardiovascular markers. There was another study, clinical study, at Stanford. This time there were three groups. One group was on the Atkins diet, one was on the American Heart Association diet, third group was on the Dean Ornish very low-fat diet. And once again, people on the Atkins diet not only lost more weight, they showed the greatest improvements in cardiovascular markers. People on the Ornish diet, the low-fat diet, showed the least improvement. Now what was interesting about this one is that this guy here, the lead investigator, the one that looks sort of John Denverish, he's a longtime vegetarian who admitted it pained him to report these results. But he's a good scientist, so he did. Now, given all this recent research, I think it's obvious the lipid hypothesis was a big fat fiasco, partly because we've spent 40 years aiming at the wrong target. But to me, the real big fiasco is what it did to the composition of our diets. If we compare the American diet back in the days of the McGovern Committee to today, this is what we get. It's the proportion of where we are getting our calories. You can see, compared to 1977, we are consuming less protein, significantly less fat, and quite a bit more carbohydrate. And that is why I believe we've seen such a rise in obesity and diabetes. Now, I'm not going to show you the figures on obesity because you've seen them on the news a gazillion times and they always show the fat people walking by. So let's just talk about what might be causing this. The prevailing theory for why people have been getting heavier is what I call the fat, lazy slob theory. Which is, well, gosh darn it, people just eat too much and they don't exercise enough, so they're getting fat. In other words, they think this was all about a change in character. For 200 years, apparently, Americans had the good discipline to eat just enough and make sure they got enough exercise, and so we stayed lean, and now, all in one generation, mind you, 2/3 of Americans decided, what the heck, I'll just become a fat, lazy slob. So, our grandparents had character, but we don't. That sound about right? See, I don't believe in the fat, lazy slob theory because I don't think this is about character. I think this is clearly about a change in biochemistry. Because to me, saying some people are obese because they eat too much is about as illuminating as saying, well, some people are alcoholics because they drink too much. That not only doesn't provide an answer, it's not even asking the right question, which is, why are they drinking too much? Why do some people crave alcohol in a way that normal people don't? Well, same thing here. If we're going to understand why people have been getting heavier, then we need to understand why they're craving more food. And we need to understand it at the biochemical level. So let's take a quick look at what causes us to gain weight. Now, for generations, we've all been told that gaining and losing weight works just like a bank account. It's all about calories in versus calories out. If you eat too much, you make deposits in your fat cells, and then they just sit there like bad pennies until you finally develop some discipline, make a withdrawal, which you must do by eating less or exercising more. And 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. So just cut 500 calories a day out of your diet, and you'll lose 1 pound a week. Has everybody heard that one? Anybody tried to do it and found out it doesn't seem to work so well? That's the problem with this theory. It doesn't work in real life. It doesn't even work in clinical research. I'll give you a couple of examples. In the Women's Health Initiative, thousands of women cut their calorie intake by an average of 360 calories, mostly by going on lower fat diets. They were on that for 8 years. Average weight loss, 2 pounds. Some of the women lost weight and ended up with bigger bellies, by the way. There was, on the other side of the calorie equation, there was a man named James Levine who conducted overfeeding studies. He took naturally lean prisoners, these guys with the veiny arms and legs and ripped abs, and he had them eat thousands of extra calories per day for several months. None of them gained close to what the calories in, calories out equation predicted they should gain. In fact, one prisoner consumed 10,000 calories for 200 days, and he lost 9 pounds. I've done that gained 9 pounds, which I can do in a bad weekend, by the way. Same thing has happened in animal research. This was a recent study. Researchers took obese mice. They cut their calorie intake by 5% for 4 weeks. The result, they gained adipose tissue and lost lean muscle mass. In other words, dieting made them fatter. Now, clearly there's something a lot more complex going on with weight loss than just counting the calories in and the calories out. And as it turned out, back in the 1930s, German and Austrian researchers did, in fact, figure it out. Unfortunately, World War II came along. Their work was lost. Hadn't been seen for decades. But this is what they figured out. Your body fat is actually a crucial part of your metabolism. And the amount of body fat you're going to carry around is largely determined by hormones. Now, there are a lot of hormones involved here, but the grand poobah, the big mover, is insulin. If you know diabetics, you know they take insulin to keep their blood sugar down. Why? Because high blood sugar is toxic, right? High blood sugar will kill you. If they don't control their blood sugar, they can go blind, they can lose their kidneys, they can end up having their limbs amputated. At the same time, your brain needs blood sugar, and low blood sugar is dangerous because low blood sugar can send you into a coma, and you can even die. So, at any given moment, this is crucially important, your metabolism's #1 goal is to keep your blood sugar in a very narrow range. That's what insulin helps to do, and when it's working, when your metabolism is functioning, this is actually an engineering marvel. So let's take a look at how this works inside the body. For purposes of illustration, these are our fat cells with little fat globules in them. This is our bloodstream with both fat and sugar in it. And down here we have some really handsome muscles and organs, okay? Now, the first thing we need to understand about how this metabolism works is that the vast majority of your body can burn either sugar or fat for fuel. In fact, when you wake up in the morning, maybe it's been 12 hours since you ate, you might be getting as much as 85% of your body's energy at that point from fat. So, you eat a meal and your blood sugar goes up. You now have both sugar and fat in your bloodstream. Well, high blood sugar is toxic. So your metabolism's goal at this point is to bring your blood sugar down, which means it wants you to switch from burning primarily fat to burning primarily sugar for a while. That's what insulin does. So out comes insulin, these little eyes. Insulin pushes the sugar into your cells, so you'll burn off the sugar first, and at the same time, insulin pushes fat into your fat cells and holds it there. It holds it there to make sure you will burn the sugar first. And if your sugar is still too high, your body will send blood sugar off to your liver, which will convert it to fat and store it. So, a little while later, because you've been burning sugar, your blood sugar starts to drop. Well, if your blood sugar goes too low, once again, that's bad for your brain. Your brain needs some blood sugar. At this point, your metabolism's goal is to keep your blood sugar level by slowly switching you back to burning fat. So, for that to happen, the insulin goes down. Since the insulin level is down, the fat is no longer locked in your fat cells. It will slip back into your bloodstream, and it will start feeding your muscles and organs again. So as you can see, your fat cells are not a garbage dump. They're not something that only comes into the equation when you overeat. They're not something Mother Nature put on you so you'd be afraid to wear a bathing suit in public. Fat cells are an important part of your metabolism. If you all are hybrid cars, your fat cells are the rechargeable battery in the system. And to keep your blood sugar level, your body needs to be able to alternate between storing and retrieving fat all day long. Keep that blood sugar level by altering the mix. Is that clear? Okay. Brilliant system, isn't it? Now let's see how we can take that system and screw it up. First thing we need to understand is that carbohydrates are just sugar molecules strung together. When you consume carbohydrates, your digestive system will chop them up and turn them into blood sugar. Now, how many of you have heard of the glycemic index? Show of hands. Pretty much everybody? Good. Then, as you know, the glycemic index is a measurement of how quickly your body will turn various foods into sugar. The foods we ate during most of our evolution nearly all had a low glycemic index, somewhere between 20 and 40, which means for most of our evolution, we were never jacking our blood sugar up. So now let's look at the foods we eat today. Table sugar has a glycemic index of 64. Coca-Cola has a glycemic index of 63, pretty much like just drinking sugar. Well, we wouldn't want to put those in our bodies. Maybe we should stick with those wholesome foods the food pyramid would recommend, such as Raisin Bran, or shredded wheat, or whole wheat bread. How many of you didn't know this? Well, according to the FDA, because of this label they make all the food manufacturers use, you not only should be eating those, you should be eating somewhere between 300 and 400 grams per day of foods like that. Why? Because the McGovern Commission didn't want you to get your energy from fat because fat would kill you. Now, once again, what does this system do? Provides you with fuel while keeping your blood sugar level. What does level blood sugar mean? If you are not a diabetic, how much glucose do you think is in your entire bloodstream right now? Does anybody know? Can I get votes for 1 cup? If you're not a diabetic and you have normal blood sugar, the amount of glucose in your bloodstream right now is about 1 teaspoon. 300 carbohydrates per day is metabolized into 1.5 cups of sugar. 400 carbohydrates, which is actually the average in America these days, metabolizes into 2 cups of sugar. If you are getting 300 to 400 carbohydrates per day from high glycemic foods like these, you are flooding your bloodstream with sugar, which means your body is going to produce a lot of insulin to bring it down because it has to, because high blood sugar is toxic. Now, remember when you were a kid and you could eat as much junk as you wanted? You never gained any weight, never got fat? That's because when you were a kid, you still had a functioning metabolism, a resilient metabolism. That means you could flood your bloodstream with sugar.